Welcome to another episode of Anime Criterion, where I, Phantom Thief Black, seek to answer the question, if anime had a Criterion collection, what would it look like? Today we shall be focusing on da-da-dum, Mob Psycho 100 1 and Mob Psycho 100 2, but I will refer to it all as Mob Psycho 100. I know you're all surprised, me too. A channel that is saying something is Criterion worthy, sinking so low to mention a shonen anime. Honestly though, shonen is the reason I decided to quit being an art thief and highlights shows worthy of a good steal. And besides, there are plenty of other Phantom Thieves out there. We have a little organization and everything. We all go to the tea parties and we're all coordinated, color coded, just like the Power Rangers. I'm Phantom Thief Black, but there's Phantom Thief White, Phantom Thief Blue, Phantom Thief Red, Green, Asian, all the types. So, my absence, unfortunately, will not be missed. But enough about me. Let's get down to business.
In all fairness, thanks to the sheer amount of filler shown in anime, it is quite easy to make broad statements such as anime has no depth or anime is just for entertainment, because shonen makes up the perception of what anime is. However, it is still a visual medium that tells a story, and stories have messages and meaning, just not all are useful, accurate, or deep. And while being a commercial product means entertainment is a factor that needs to be considered, otherwise, how else do you get butts in the seat? That does not mean there is nothing more there. In the oversaturated market of shonen, it is quite the difficult task to stand out amongst the rabble, and even more difficult to be something unique and good at the same time. Mob Psycho 100 is one of these few instances where such an event occurs. For those who are unfamiliar or unaware of what shonen is a demographic of anime meant for young boys under the age of 18. However, it has transcended this simple category and become a genre in itself, by simply containing a pantheon of consistent tropes. Most of these tropes, of course, come from Dragon Ball Z, which created the second form trope via Super Saiyan, and the rest of the tropes usually come from Dragon Ball Z's progenitor, Fist of the North Star. Power is the typical topic of shonen, the I need to get stronger approach to things, and action, comedy, slice of life, ecchi are the primary four genres of shonen. The problem with shonen is that it has become the way people perceive anime and the lens by which they view it, even animes that clearly do not belong in the genre, such as Berserk. So to clarify, shonen is typically about a young male protagonist with some power that grows alongside the main character's supposed character development, as he chases after some lofty goal, usually something impossibly difficult. Naruto, cursed with the power of the nine-tailed fox, wants to become Hokage. Luffy, with the power of Mr. Fantastic, wants to find the treasure. Subaru Natsuke cannot die and is trying to marry a girl completely out of his league. Ichigo, cursed to be a Soul Reaper, wants to kill all the Hollow. The list goes on and on and on and on. Mob Psycho 100 follows this trend to an extent. Mob is a middle schooler trying to improve himself in order to win Tsubomi's heart. But Mob deviates by being one of the few shonen that approaches this concept in a genuine manner, where improvement in shonen is typically seen as gaining a new power after a long speech and perhaps a friend dying. In Mob Psycho, Mob works day in and day out, growing step by step. In typical shonen, it is often spoken that friends are the reason the main character was able to achieve whatever they set out to do. But if you take a look at most shonen, it is the main character that does almost everything, having friends merely as a plot device to give the character another power or reason to kill a baddie. But in Mob, friends help him grow as a person and support him both physically and emotionally, leading to his growth as a person. As to what Mob Psycho is as a whole, let's break down the show by season. Both are structurally the same, with the first half being about misadventures forming a basis for character development, followed by a two-part midsection about another character facing themselves, and ended in the second half by a challenge to Mob's beliefs. And as far as ideals and values being espoused, the OP gets at the point fairly quickly and as a side note, highlights the excellent animation quality of the show. Let's take a look, shall we?
If everyone is not special, maybe you can't be what you want to be. それぞれの答えにつかる。One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 憧れ悩みパンプアップ。自分探してる場所にないものねだり最高将来青春ソロとスプラッシュ What do you want? What do you want? Who do you want? Just like one. If everyone is not special, maybe you can't be what you want to be. 喜び悲しみ高いでも Your life is your one okay 特別じゃなくても okay それぞれの答えにつかる
While there is a What's in an OP video by Mother's Basement, which goes into very fine detail for what makes this opening brilliant, I'll just go over the basic idea within the lyrics of the song. You are not special, so you can be who you want to be. That leads us into the first topic. Warning, entire show spoilers ahead. Part 1. You're not special. For shonen anime, this is a uniquely strange message, especially considering on its face, Mob is a typical shonen protagonist. He is a middle school student with an average to below average existence, with his only gift being his incredibly powerful psychic ability. So typically, shonen will try to portray this power as the thing that makes the main character special, and the reason they are able to save everyone, and become the hero. However, in Mob Psycho 100, as Reagan points out quite accurately, there are good athletes and scientists and pharma and all sorts of other skills and talents that other humans possess that make individuals special. But as mentioned in The Incredibles by Dash,
everyone's special, Dash, which is another way of saying no one is.
To this point, we can look at the mid-season finale where Mob encounters Teru for the first time. After Mob is tricked into meeting an obviously fake girl, and let me stress this, an obviously fake girl, that in her message, she needed to say, I'm a girl. Ah, poor Mob and his youthful ignorance. But anyway, after that, he finds himself amidst a school gang war against Black Vinegar Middle School to determine who has the strongest students. Taru eventually defeats everyone using his psychic abilities, leaving only Mob left, but Mob refuses to fight because he believes in rules established by Reagan, that he never use his powers against another human being. Instead, Mob tries to convince Taru that relying on his power is holding him back. Without his powers, Taru is nothing. Not even
genius billionaire playboy philanthropist.
But Taru refuses to acknowledge this fact and keeps egging Mob on for a fight. Mob finally explodes and blasts Taru away with relative ease, and as Taru floats above the clouds, he realizes that compared to Mob, he is nothing, and to that end, his powers are insignificant, making his entire reliance on them insignificant. He was not special, he was simply just another Esper. Facing this realization, Teru focuses on being the person he wants to be, improving himself to become more than just a kid with psychic powers. And that brings us to the next point. Part 2. Self-improvement. While it is often talked much about in shonen anime, self-improvement is rarely ever shown in a proper light. Sure, you might see characters claim large swaths of character development right before receiving an 11th hour superpower, but then they proceed to act essentially the same, ready to begin another self-righteous lecture at the villain around the corner. Truly, it is rare to see a character work on the flaws, keeping them from who they have the potential of being. This is precisely how Mob has acted since the beginning of the show. In episode 2, the Telepathy Club faces losing their club room to the Bodybuilder Club due to a lack of members. They try to convince Mob to join their club and save their time to play video games and goof off. At the pivotal moment when Mob must decide which club he chooses to affiliate with, he envisions a version of himself worthy of winning the heart of his crush, Tsubomi. So he makes the only reasonable decision and joins the bodybuilder club, ending the episode. While this might not seem strange, for a typical shonen anime, Mob definitely would have joined the telepathy club. Normally, a shonen anime would have the main character join the outcasts of their respective environments and display camaraderie around being with your quirky group of friends. Had Mob joined the outcasts, I imagine the show would look quite different. Perhaps Mob and the telepathy club would have gone off on wacky adventures solving paranormal mysteries or something to that effect. It would be similar to the show Gintama, but instead, we get a character that wishes to improve in the many areas he lacks. In this case, he decides to work on his body. Many times during the show, self-improvement counters the idea that a person with psychic powers makes them inherently unique. Mob says enough that psychic powers cannot make you popular. When he was a child, he showed Tsubomi his powers. After a short while of him levitating objects for her, she grew bored. As far as muscle, while psychic powers can increase a person's physical strength, they are an ill replacement for muscle already there, as shown in Season 2 when Musashi faces off against a muscle-enhanced Esper. This point is also shown through the contrast to his brother. When Mob is gifted with psychic ability, his brother is gifted with intelligence and social skills. As I said before, Mob has neither friends nor a personality strong enough to resist the constant flow of people trying to abuse his powers. But what he does contain, though unwittingly, is a strong bit of determination. Finding Reagan, his master, opened a door for him to connect to other people, and from there, he strives to be better than he was the day before. Throughout Mob's journey, his improvement is clear, and I don't mean that his powers have reached over 9,000. I mean daily activities and his interactions with others demonstrate how far he has climbed since the first episode. Mob begins as a relative nobody, and by the end, becomes a person that has made a significant impact on the lives of those around him. For many, he inspired them to grow and improve, to stop over-exaggerating their importance due to psychic abilities. For others, he simply kept their dreams alive or broke them free from malicious intent. A more concrete example is when he tried doing his school run with the goal in mind of reaching the top 10. This whole time, he had been building his body for that specific goal so that he might ask Tsubomi out afterwards. But his plans were pushed up by a year. The previous year, he reached the bottom 10 at 391, but this time, had he not passed out, he would have placed around 74. For those bad at math, that's an increase of 317 places. The Mob is getting places. Another more concrete example is viewed through the way he controls his psychic abilities. Mob represses his emotions until they reach a breaking point at 100%, which at that point, he explodes with unrelenting power and crushes any before him. At the start of the show, this power always manifested itself as anger, but towards the end, he uses a multitude of emotions to express this power, and even manages to retain his sense of self in the final fight. This control over his emotions marks his biggest bout of growth since the beginning. But Mob even demonstrates smaller bouts of change throughout the show, like in one such instance, after the fight with Teru, when he recalls the first time he lost control of his powers. Both his brother and bullies were harmed during his explosion of power. During the episode, he apologizes to his brother for the way he acted then. In that moment, he owned up to his mistakes and confronted feelings difficult to wrestle with, rather than repress them for another explosion. This sort of consistent growth marks a stark difference from typical shonen, and is of course, just good storytelling in general. But while Mob might be able to strive for a better version of himself, those without the determination attempt shortcuts to power, and as a result, fall for those with more malicious intentions. There is no shortcut to power. Doing the hard work takes time, but it is necessary to achieve a better life. It should be noted that every villain or malicious figure in Mob Psycho 100 happens to be a con man of sorts, Reagan and Dimple being the first examples, and the final boss being the last example. The powerful prey on those perceived to be lesser, and abuse their positions to further their own ends. And when everyone bows down before them, a mindset emerges where a person with power believes their actions are justified in order to lead the world down a certain path. While Mob Psycho 100 presents many positive ideals for young men to strive towards, positive masculinity, it also displays the many trappings that make it easy to stray from an ideal path. And in this way, the show can be seen as sort of a warning for what to avoid. The first time this show takes a deeper look at this subject is around the midpoint, when Mob's brother, Ritsu, begins developing psychic powers. This happens right after he and the student council president Shinji frame a gangster student, Onegawara, for destroying flutes. Part 3. Might does not make right. It didn't matter what the truth of the matter was. People viewed Onegawara as a delinquent and believed the student council simply because of their powerful position. They were, as Shinji viewed it, cleaning the filth out of their school. But it turns out, Onegawara wasn't so bad a student. He was not book smart for sure, but he was dedicated. His suspension from the school broke his streak of never being absent or tardy for class. He may have been going through his rebellious middle school years, but to say he was a delinquent and ruining the school was simply the student council boys on a power trip. And the show continues this power trip through Ritsu. As I said before, his psychic powers began developing, thanks to Dimple, and now he was starting to view himself as someone above everyone else. He begins going into a downward spiral until Teru finds him on the street. Teru quickly checks Ritsu's powers and tries to help him see the light in the same way Mob did for him. It was only until Ritsu watched Mob prostrate himself before a bunch of thugs far weaker than him did he start to question his understanding of power. Then he's captured by an Esper from the evil organization Claw. In the show, Claw seeks to rule the world because they believe that their psychic powers have given them some sort of divine right over everyone else. In other words, it is the duty of the powerful to guide the weak. But this viewpoint is challenged once more when Ritsu escapes prison. It takes all the unique power sets of him and a bunch of other far weaker Espers to escape. And by the end of the first season, Reagan, boosted by Mob, gives the elite members of Claw, the Scars, a stern talking to. All of them realize that with all of their power, they still can't do anything really. They need all of society in all of its forms to even survive. Left alone, these powerful Espers would have no way to grow food or heal the sick or anything practical. This theme recurs many times throughout the show, but essentially boils down to, we, as in humanity, all need each other. Of course, even believing might does not make right, there's still one glaring issue with this concept, and that is Mob himself. In theory, many shonens attempt to promote the same ideas as Mob Psycho 100, but the fact of the matter is, the main character is still the strongest being in existence, forcing others to see their way of things. Which is why the show seeks to respond to this flaw in Season 2. Part 4. We shape each other. At the midpoint of Season 2, Mob's powers are met with a real challenge. An evil spirit possesses a girl, but to complicate matters, this evil spirit, Mogami, formerly used to be an Esper capable of absorbing evil spirits. This created a spirit Mob could not exorcise with his powers. Instead, he needed to become a spirit and enter into the possessed girl that way, in order to wrest control from the evil spirit. But doing so traps him in a fictional world of Mogami's creation for what felt like 6 months. During this time, Mob glimpses at what his life could have been like had things been different. Bullies constantly torture him, and he never sought out Reagan, leaving him a jumble of negative emotions. In this version of Mob, he would use the full 100% of his powers against people and think himself above everyone else. Dimple reminds Mob of the good people that surround him. That's when Mob realizes the effect good people and friends have had on him. We as individuals can lift each other up and fight against toxic perceptions of power that lead so many astray. And in the Mob Psycho 100 world, emotion serves as the basis for psychic abilities. Mob remembers he's saving a life, and here we get the first burst of his power at 100%, except with positive emotions. Now Mob is in control, and he pushes the evil spirit out of the girl's body. Mogami doesn't concede just yet in his views that people are a poison, but he does agree to see if Mob's viewpoints will lead to a correct path. This theme is carried on in the next episodes, when Reagan and Mob have a slight falling out. Reagan begins abusing Mob's time when he's trying to hang out with friends, something he's never really had before. As a result, Reagan returns to doing things the way he used to before Mob came into his life. He starts taking the jobs that require no real psychic abilities, and eventually becomes a rising star in the psychic world. One show invites him on television to perform a live exorcism. Reagan quickly realizes the kid is not really possessed, but he sees money and fame and falls into the trap of another, more famous exorcist named Goto. On national television, Reagan is exposed as a fraud, sending him into a downward spiral. He finally goes on television to apologize for his behavior, but the reporters are relentless, trying their hardest to make him admit he's a fraud. Reagan holds strong until they read an essay of his when he was still in school. Reagan wanted to be somebody, like so many others in this show, and that realization nearly breaks him. Then, the cameras and mics and a whole bunch of other stuff begins floating in the auditorium, and his identity is saved. Of course, Mob came to the rescue to save Reagan, because even though Reagan has been using Mob this whole time to further his own ends, at the end of the day, Reagan was a good guy. In the same episode, they show how Mob met Reagan as they did in the first season, except this time, you get Reagan's perspective. Each gave the other purpose and focus towards doing good and not inflicting harm upon others. Each needed the other in order to grow as people, because real friends, good friends, will be there for each other and help shape each other into the person they want to be. Reagan needed this wake-up call to remember to treat Mob as a person, not just a tool. This is the true power of friendship, touted about and shown so often but rarely shown. Part 5. Strength versus Power. All the themes and messages of the show culminate at the end of Season 2, when Claw executes their plan for world domination. The Ultimates 5 and Claw destroy the city, and Toichiro watches from the highest tower. The big question is how Mob plans on dealing with Toichiro, the final boss of the show. So far, Mob never chooses to fight others. He tends to either talk them down or find a way to run. But there is no running in this case, because Toichiro will not be stopped by anyone. Throughout the season, it has been foreshadowed that Mob would have to face his problems without relying on anyone else. In episode 3 of season 2, he is told, "You have the power, deal with them yourself." Again in episode 11, Mogami, before vanishing, tells Mob that some things can be solved with kindness, but other times, you need to be tough on people. Mob takes this to heart and chooses to face Toichiro alone. On the way up, he fights against a man named Serizawa, who has become entirely dependent on Toichiro. Mob's power allows him to absorb some of Serizawa's psychic energy and get a glimpse into his emotions and past. They realize their similarities, so Mob simply offers his friendship, something Serizawa still had yet to attain. This leaves only Toichiro left. Mob tries to reason with Toichiro first, but once he sees the man cannot be reached with words, they battle. Toichiro makes an appropriate final villain for Mob, because their ideologies differ so much, yet they both were gifted with the same ability set. Both Mob and Toichiro have the ability to store power, and with that in mind, both of their powers are unlimited. Mob at unknown percentage power effectively ties with Toichiro, so even now, Toichiro must face the realization that he too is not special. His whole life, he believed he was superior to everyone else around him, making every sacrifice he deemed necessary along the way, and in doing so, surrounded himself with tools, lost the love of his wife, and was betrayed by his own son. But here he comes face to face with Mob, who has repeatedly gone through his life with humility and kindness. Mob prostrated himself before bullies, broke a group free from a cult, restored a girl's novel after her so-called friends tore her work to shreds, saved the lives of a ghost family simply wanting to live together in peace, etc. This is the difference between these two characters, strength versus power. Having absolute might is a dead end because at the end of the day, someone will be better than you or your equal. It is a struggle to reach the top of the pyramid within predefined limits, and the moment a person is brought down, there is nothing left within them. Not everyone is.
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
There is so much more to the world than simply power. The strength of others is to make the most of what they have and define themselves. Absolute power cannot change hearts, run society, create love, etc. And power does not give someone the right to place value on another person's life. All their power was good for was forcing Toichiro to consider his place in the world. And here is where Mob connected with him, doing the same thing he did with Serizawa. Toichiro wants to reconnect with his wife and fill that hole in his heart with true love. At the end of the day, people just want to connect and feel loved. Toichiro is no different. He accepts this lesson and throws away his childish notions of power. Conclusion. Mob Psycho 100 is a shonen in an ocean of shonen, and yet somehow, it still manages to stand out. From its unique animation, to awesome OPs, to the killer fight scenes, to just the stories and themes, this show is something else. But overall, Mob Psycho 100 is genuine. Those themes of friendship power are displayed often as Mob's friends protect him and help shape him into the best version of himself. Hard work paying off is not lip service for the main character to simply hit the next level of Super Saiyan once their friend dies, which is helped by Mob's power being maxed out from the start. Mob has goals in mind, and he works every day to reaching them. So that by the character of Mob in Season 1 really does seem almost completely changed by the last episode of Season 2. And most of all, the idea that raw power can determine everything is challenged and refuted constantly. Even though they say psychic powers can grow plants, the product tastes awful. Even though psychic powers can give muscle, they pale in comparison to real muscle. So nothing comes easy. It is a slow grind, but hard work will always pay off more in the end.
And with that, we come to the end of this video. It's been fun, truly. And though shonen is typically meant for young boys under the age of 18, rarely do I see messages healthy for that demographic to follow. But they are, entertaining. They have the little, the fight scenes. They have colors, music, beautiful animation, plots that happen and what have you. So, they have that going for them. But I just personally believe Mob Psycho 100 stands out from them just just a tad bit that might push it up to something being worthy to fit in the anime criterion. It has set itself far apart from the rest. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it, and have a lovely day, night, wherever you are, whatever you are. Farewell.